The towering metal and glass spires of Nexus Prime dominated the burned orange skyline. Suspended walkways crisscrossed between structures like a massive metal spiderweb, connecting the bustling interplanetary trading station's many levels. On the lower floors, nestled between entertainment venues catering to multiple species, stood Iron Paradise Gym, Earth-style fitness, a rare establishment offering traditional human workout methods in this technologically advanced melting pot. Commander Naira Vex moved through the gym with predatory grace, her vibrant orange skin contrasting sharply with her silver-white ponytail. As head of security for the Cryan delegation, she was tasked with ensuring their safety during the negotiations, and if necessary, gathering intelligence on the Earth delegation. Her elite guard training had prepared her for combat in every form, but nothing had prepared her for the sight before her. Captain John Reed, Earth Defense Force representative, was lifting crude metal weights in the corner of the facility. His muscular physique glistened with sweat as he performed another repetition. Naira watched with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as one of the physically weaker species. Yet they persisted in these primitive training methods instead of using enhancement technology like every other civilized race. "Quite the antique workout," she called out, approaching him with a smirk playing across her orange features. "I didn't realize the Earth Defense Force was so traditional." John set down the weights and regarded her calmly. His broad shoulders straightened as he reached for a towel to wipe his face. "Commander Vex, I've heard the Cryan Elite Guard prefers neural enhancement chambers. Efficient, but not very satisfying." "Satisfying?" Naira laughed, the sound musical yet condescending. "We prefer effective. Your methods seem unnecessarily time-consuming and primitive." John's lips curved into a challenging smile. "Sometimes the old ways work best. Technology fails. Bodies endure, if properly conditioned." "Is that so?" Naira's eyes gleamed with mischief. She poked a finger toward his abdomen. "Your soft human physiology hardly seems worth the effort." "Go ahead." John's smile widened, a glint of challenge in his eyes. "Punch me, right here." He patted his exposed stomach. "Don't hold back." Several gym patrons paused their workouts, sensing the tension between the representatives of two powerful civilizations. Naira's eyes narrowed. Was this some kind of trap? A diplomatic incident in the making? She glanced around, noting that no official observers were present, just civilian witnesses from various species. "That would be assault on a diplomatic representative," she replied coolly. "Consider it a cultural exchange," John countered. "I'm offering no diplomatic consequences." The challenge was too tempting. Naira had trained in combat her entire life. Cryan physiology was renowned throughout the galaxy for its durability and strength. Humans were soft, fragile creatures who compensated with technology and cunning. She could easily control her strength to avoid serious injury while still teaching this arrogant human a lesson. "Very well." She settled into a balanced stance. "If you insist." With precise form, Naira launched a controlled jab aimed at John's abdomen, firm enough to hurt and send a message, but not enough to cause internal damage. Her fist connected with his stomach. The impact was like hitting a steel bulkhead. Pain exploded through her hand. Two distinct cracks echoed through the suddenly silent gym. John hadn't even flinched. Naira staggered back, clutching her hand to her chest, orange face contorted in shock and pain. "What? How?" John's expression remained calm, but his eyes held a mixture of concern and satisfaction. "Are you all right? Perhaps you should visit the medical bay." You tricked me," she hissed, trying to maintain her dignity despite the throbbing agony in her hand. "Not at all," John replied, slinging a towel over his shoulder. "I simply demonstrated that appearances can be deceiving. Humans evolved on a high-gravity world with predators at every turn. We look soft, but we're tougher than most give us credit for." Humiliation burned through Naira even hotter than the pain. She'd broken her hand, at least 2 metacarpal bones, judging by the distinct cracks, on a human's abdominal muscles. It was unthinkable, inconceivable. The other gym patrons were whispering among themselves. Word of this would spread throughout the station. "The medical bay is on level 4, John added, his voice gentler now. "Would you like me to accompany you?" "I don't need human assistance," Naira snapped, but her voice lacked its usual edge. The pain was making it difficult to maintain her composure. "As you wish," John nodded respectfully. "I'll see you at tomorrow's negotiations, Commander." Naira retreated from the gym, her pride more damaged than her hand. As the door closed behind her, she heard the hushed, excited whispers already spreading through the facility. By tomorrow, everyone on Nexus Prime would know that a Cryan elite guard had broken her hand punching a human stomach. The implications were staggering. If humans were physically more resilient than the galaxy believed, what other misconceptions might exist? And what would General Draios think when he learned of this humiliating incident? As she made her way to the medical bay, Naira realized this encounter had changed everything, though she couldn't yet know just how profound that change would be. The medical bay glowed with soft blue light, standard for interspecies medical facilities across the galaxy. The Taurian doctor examined Naira's hand with 6 nimble fingers, manipulating the advanced imaging equipment with practiced ease. 2 metacarpal fractures, the physician confirmed, blinking slowly with vertical eyelids. "Clean breaks, fortunately." "What manner of impact caused this injury, Commander?" Naira avoided the doctor's gaze. "Training accident." The Taurian's skin shifted to a knowing shade of purple, but didn't press further. "I'll apply the bone knitter. You'll need to keep it immobilized for 6 hours." As the doctor worked, applying the regenerative device to her hand, Naira stared at the ceiling. Her thoughts were a storm of conflicting emotions, humiliation, curiosity, and a strange sort of respect. The human captain had not gloated or taken advantage of her moment of weakness. In fact, he'd seemed genuinely concerned. "Your treatment is complete," the Taurian doctor said, interrupting her thoughts. "Remain here for observation for 30 minutes. Then you may leave. Avoid strenuous activities with this hand for at least 12 hours. Naira nodded absently, her mind still replaying the incident. How was it possible for a human to withstand a Cryan strike without flinching? She needed to know more. When the observation period ended, she gathered her uniform jacket and prepared to leave. As the medical bay doors slid open, she found herself face to face with Captain John Reed. "Commander," he greeted her, his expression neutral. "I wanted to check on your condition." Naira bristled. "I'm perfectly fine. Cryan healing is superior to most species." "I'm glad to hear it." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I also came to invite you to Cosmic Drift. I owe you a drink, I think." Naira raised an eyebrow. "You owe me? I'm the one who struck you." "At my invitation," John pointed out. "Besides, I feel responsible for your injury. Consider it a peace offering between our delegations." She should refuse. Every instinct told her to maintain distance, to return to her quarters and file her daily security report, omitting the embarrassing incident. Of course. But curiosity burned within her, stronger than pride. "One drink," she conceded. "For diplomatic relations." The Cosmic Drift was located on the entertainment level of Nexus Prime. The bar's main attraction was a simulated hyperspace journey viewed through panoramic windows. Stars streaked by in brilliant colors, creating the illusion of faster-than-light travel while patrons remained stationary. The shifting lights cast ever-changing patterns across the faces of the diverse clientele. They found a quiet booth away from the main crowd. John ordered something called whiskey, neat, while Naira selected a Cryan fermented nectar. "Your hand?" John asked when their drinks arrived. Naira flexed her fingers experimentally. Nearly healed. Cryon regeneration is quite efficient. Impressive, John acknowledged with a nod. I apologize if I embarrassed you. That wasn't my intention. Then what was your intention, Captain? John took a slow sip of his amber liquid before answering. To challenge a misconception, humans are often underestimated in the galaxy. It can work to our advantage, but it also leads to misunderstandings. Such as me breaking my hand on your abdomen, Naira supplied dryly. John's laugh was unexpected, warm, and genuine. Exactly. Though to be fair, I've spent years conditioning my body. Not all humans are built the same. The conversation flowed more easily after that. Naira found herself discussing cryon training methods, while John explained the human philosophy of progressive resistance training. Their discussion evolved from physical conditioning to cultural differences, to foods from their respective homeworlds. You've never tasted a real Earth apple? John seemed genuinely shocked. The synthesized versions don't compare. If we ever get the chance, I'll have one shipped from Earth for you. And you've never experienced sunrise on the Cryon homeworld, Naira countered. The triple sunrise creates a harmonic resonance in our crystalline forests. It's indescribable. Time passed unnoticed as they conversed. Naira was surprised to discover that she was enjoying herself, genuinely enjoying the company of a human. It was unexpected. Her comm unit buzzed, interrupting the moment. A secure message from General Draus. Naira's expression immediately shifted to professional neutrality. Duty calls? John asked, noticing the change. Yes, I should return to my quarters. She rose from the table. Thank you for the drink, Captain. John, he corrected, when we're off duty. Naira hesitated, then inclined her head slightly. John, then. She didn't offer her own first name in return. That would be a step too far. As she walked back to her quarters, Naira realized she had learned more about humans in one evening than in her entire career. And worse, she had found herself enjoying the humans' company. This complicated matters considerably. In her secure quarters, she activated the communication terminal with her palm print. General Draus's stern face appeared on the screen. Commander Vex, he greeted her. Your daily report was lacking in detail. Apologies, General. The negotiations proceeded as expected. Nothing significant to report. Draus's eyes narrowed. I've received word that you were seen with the Earth representative, Captain Reed, in a social setting. News traveled fast on Nexus Prime. Naira kept her expression neutral. A diplomatic courtesy, sir, gathering information on our counterparts. Good. Continue monitoring the Earth delegation. They cannot be trusted. Draus leaned closer to the screen, his voice lowering. We have intelligence suggesting they plan to sabotage our mining rights claims. Find evidence if you can. Create it if you must. Naira felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Create evidence, sir. The Taurus sector is rich in crystalline deposits that rightfully belong to the Cryon Imperium. We will not allow humans to claim it through these so-called negotiations. His expression hardened. Do what is necessary, Commander. Draus out. The screen went dark, leaving Naira staring at her own reflection. Create false evidence against the Earth delegation? Against John? The order felt wrong, but her duty to the Cryon Imperium was absolute. Wasn't it? John Reed returned to his temporary quarters, his mind still lingering on his conversation with Commander Vex. The Cryon officer was formidable, intelligent, and unexpectedly engaging once her guard lowered slightly. He hadn't anticipated enjoying her company quite so much. His communication unit chimed as he entered his room. Secure channel from Earth Defense Force headquarters. Reed here, he answered, activating the encryption protocols. Captain. Admiral Perkins appeared on screen, his weathered face grave. We've received intelligence about arms smuggling on Nexus Prime. The Blacker Syndicate has been moving prohibited weapons through the station, possibly with the knowledge of certain faction representatives. John's expression remained carefully neutral. Any idea which factions might be involved, sir? Nothing concrete, but monitor the Cryan delegation closely. Their interest in the Taurus sector is suspicious. It's far from their established territories. Commander Vex doesn't strike me as someone involved in illegal arms dealing, John found himself saying. Perkins raised an eyebrow. You've made contact with their security chief? Brief interactions, John replied smoothly. Standard diplomatic engagement. Well, don't let her orange skin and silver hair distract you from your mission. Captain, find the weapons cache and determine who's behind it. If the Cryans are clean, all the better. But if not, he left the implication hanging. Understood, sir. Read out. The communication ended, leaving John with complicated thoughts. His instincts told him Naira wasn't involved in weapons smuggling, but she was certainly hiding something. The way she'd responded to that message in the bar suggested she'd received new orders that troubled her. He pulled up the station schematics on his datapad, focusing on the service corridors and maintenance tunnels. If the Blackar Syndicate was moving weapons through Nexus Prime, they wouldn't use the main thoroughfares. He needed to search the station's underbelly, and perhaps he'd invite a certain Cryan commander to join him. For the mission, of course. Not because he found her fascinating or wanted to see her again. Definitely not that. The next day's negotiations proceeded with the formal tedium, typical of interplanetary diplomacy. Representatives from 6 species discussed mining rights, trade routes, and defensive arrangements. Naira maintained her position behind the Cryan delegation, scanning for threats, and occasionally making eye contact with Captain Reed, who performed the same function for the Earth contingent. When the session adjourned for the midday meal, Naira intercepted John in the corridor. Captain, she addressed him formally, aware of nearby diplomats. A word in private? He followed her to a small observation alcove overlooking the station's central atrium. Once they were alone, Naira spoke in a low voice. I've received information about prohibited weapons being moved through the station, specifically through the Taurus sector maintenance tunnels. John's expression gave nothing away. Interesting. I've heard similar rumors. Blackar Syndicate? Naira's eyes narrowed. You already knew. I suspected, John corrected. I was planning to investigate tonight. As was I. Naira studied him carefully. It seems we have a common interest, despite our delegation's competing claims to the sector. John leaned against the railing, maintaining a casual posture while keeping his voice low. I propose a temporary alliance. Share information. Watch each other's backs. If the Syndicate is arming either of our delegations, we both need to know. Naira considered the offer. Working with John would give her an opportunity to monitor him, perhaps even find the evidence General Draus wanted. It would also provide backup in what could be a dangerous situation. The Blackar Syndicate was notorious for its brutal methods. Agreed, she said finally. Meet me at service entrance 42B at the station's 20th hour. Civilian clothes, minimal equipment. John nodded. I'll be there. As they parted ways, Naira felt conflicted. She was now actively planning to spend more time with the human she should be gathering or fabricating evidence against. Her mission was becoming dangerously complicated. But she couldn't deny a growing certainty. Something more sinister than routine diplomatic posturing was happening on Nexus Prime. And somehow, Captain John Reed, with his primitive workout methods and surprising strength, had become her most likely ally in uncovering it. Service entrance 42B was located in a rarely used corridor on the station's industrial level. John arrived 5 minutes early, dressed in dark civilian clothing that wouldn't restrict his movement. He carried only a compact sidearm, a multi-tool, and a small scanner capable of detecting energy weapon signatures. Commander Vex arrived precisely on time. Her silver-white hair tucked under a cap, orange skin, less conspicuous in the dim lighting, She nodded in greeting, her expression all business. "The maintenance tunnels extend through the entire tourist sector," she explained, without preamble. "If weapons are being moved, they'll use the automated cargo systems to avoid detection." "Agreed," John said. "We should start with Junction T-17. It connects to both the cargo bays and the private docking areas." They moved through the service corridors silently, avoiding the occasional maintenance drone. The infrastructure level of Nexus Prime was a stark contrast to the gleaming surfaces above: exposed conduits, intermittent lighting, and the constant hum of machinery created an almost organic atmosphere. "Tell me, Commander," John said quietly, as they navigated a particularly narrow passage. "Why would a Cryan security officer share intelligence with an Earth captain, especially given our delegation's competing interests?" Naira didn't break stride. "Illegal weapons benefit neither of our governments. Unless you believe your delegation is involved?" "No," John replied firmly. "And I prefer to believe yours isn't either." "Then we have no conflict of interest in this matter." They reached Junction T-17, a circular chamber where several maintenance tunnels converged. Cargo tracks ran along the floor, designed for automated transport modules. John activated his scanner, while Naira produced a similar device. "Energy readings consistent with plasma rifles," John murmured, studying the display. "Recent too. Within the last 12 hours. Naira nodded in agreement. "The cargo would have continued to Section T-23. She pointed to one of the tunnels. "That area has minimal security monitoring due to radiation interference from the station's power systems." "Convenient for smugglers," John observed. They followed the tunnel toward Section T-23, moving cautiously now that they had confirmation of weapons transport. The lighting grew dimmer, with patches of complete darkness between functional illumination panels. The air grew cooler, carrying a metallic tang. As they approached an intersection, Naira suddenly raised her hand in a silent warning. John froze. A moment later, he heard what she had detected: the soft footfalls of someone trying to move quietly. Naira pointed to a recessed maintenance alcove. They pressed themselves into the shadows, just as two figures appeared, moving rapidly down the intersecting corridor. Even in the dim light, the distinctive armor of Blackar Syndicate enforcers was recognizable. When the footsteps faded, they emerged from hiding. "They're heading toward the central maintenance hub," Naira whispered. "That's not where the weapons would be stored." "No," John agreed. "But it might be where they're meeting their buyers." They altered course, following the Syndicate enforcers at a safe distance. The corridor eventually opened into a larger chamber, filled with coolant pipes and monitoring equipment. Blue-tinged emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the machinery. John and Naira positioned themselves behind a bank of coolant regulators, observing as the two enforcers were joined by a third figure in the distinctive uniform of the station's private security force, clearly on the Syndicate's payroll. "Shipment arrived safely?" the corrupt security officer asked. "Yeah," one enforcer replied. 20 crates, high-end plasma rifles and disruptors. Military grade. The client's sending their representative tomorrow night for inspection before final payment." "Who's the buyer?" the security officer asked. The second enforcer laughed. "Above your pay grade. But let's just say there are some high-ranking officials who'd prefer a little conflict in this sector. War is profitable for arms dealers." John and Naira exchanged glances. High-ranking officials seeking to provoke conflict? That aligned too perfectly with both their suspicions. As they listened, John noticed a subtle shift in the lighting pattern. Someone else was approaching from another corridor. He tapped Naira's arm and pointed. They needed to move before they were discovered. Silently, they retreated down a narrow maintenance shaft. The passage was barely wide enough for one person, forcing them to press close together as they navigated away from the meeting. A sudden surge of power through nearby conduits caused the entire section to vibrate. Naira lost her footing on the metal grating. John reacted instinctively, pulling her against him and pressing back into a shadowed recess as emergency lights flashed. For a breathless moment, they were crushed together in the narrow space. Naira's back against John's chest, his arm wrapped around her waist to steady her. John was acutely aware of the warmth of her body, the subtle scent of her skin, something like cinnamon and ozone. "Power fluctuation," he whispered, his breath stirring the silver-white hair that had escaped from her cap. "Happens sometimes in these older sections." Naira didn't immediately move away when the vibration subsided. "They're coming this way," she whispered, hearing footsteps approaching their position. The maintenance shaft offered no exits. They were trapped unless they backtracked, directly into the path of the approaching syndicate members. "Trust me?" John asked, his voice barely audible. Naira hesitated, then nodded once. In a fluid motion, John spun her to face him, backed her against the wall, and brought his lips to hers. To anyone glancing down the maintenance shaft, they would appear to be nothing more than a couple seeking privacy, a common enough occurrence on a station like Nexus Prime. The kiss was meant to be a disguise, a tactical deception. It wasn't meant to send electricity coursing through his body. It wasn't meant to cause Naira to stiffen in surprise and then, astonishingly, respond with equal intensity. Footsteps approached, paused briefly, then continued past with a knowing chuckle. "Maintenance shafts occupied. Let's take the long way around." Even after the footsteps faded, neither of them immediately broke the kiss. When they finally separated, both were breathing harder than the situation warranted. "Effective tactical solution," Naira said, her voice slightly unsteady. "Standard Earth Defense Force training," John replied with a faint smile. "They teach kissing at your military academy?" Improvisation under pressure. A moment of charged silence stretched between them. Then, with unspoken agreement, they continued their mission, following a different route towards Section T-23, where the weapons were likely stored. Neither mentioned the kiss again. But something fundamental had shifted between them. A boundary had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. And in the dim blue light of Nexus Prime's maintenance level, both the Cryan commander and the human captain were uncomfortably aware that their mission had just become infinitely more complicated. They located the weapons cache in an abandoned cold storage unit. 20 crates of military-grade armaments, enough to equip a small army or start a significant conflict. "We need to document this and report it to station security," John said, scanning the serial numbers on the weapons. "These are definitely Earth Defense Force designs, but they've been modified to remove identification markers." Naira was examining the shipping manifests left carelessly on a nearby console. According to this, they were diverted from an official shipment to the Centauri colonies. She looked up, her expression troubled. "Someone with high-level access codes made this happen. The question is, who's the buyer?" John said, continuing to gather evidence with his scanner. "And how does this connect to the Taurus sector negotiations?" Before Naira could respond, her comm unit buzzed with an urgent alert. She checked it, her orange complexion paling slightly. "What is it?" John asked, immediately alert to the change in her demeanor. "Security alert. Someone accessed my quarters while we've been down here." She quickly checked the station's security logs through her device. The intruder disabled monitoring for 3 minutes before systems automatically reset. John's expression hardened. "We've been compromised. We need to move, now." They secured the evidence they'd gathered and made their way back through the maintenance tunnels, moving with greater urgency now. If someone knew they were investigating the weapons cache, both their lives were in danger. "We should separate," Naira suggested, as they approached the main station levels. "I'll return to my quarters to assess the situation." "That's exactly what they'll expect," John countered. "If someone's targeting you, your quarters aren't safe." "And where would you suggest I go, Captain? Your quarters?" The words held a challenge, but also a question. John met her gaze steadily. "Yes, it's the last place they'd look for a Cryan elite guard. And we need time to analyze what we've found and determine our next steps." After a moment's consideration, Naira nodded. Lead the way. John's temporary quarters were Spartan, but comfortable, located in the Earth Delegation's assigned section. He secured the door behind them and activated a signal jammer, standard equipment for military personnel in potentially hostile territory. The jammer will block casual surveillance, he explained, but a determined scan would still detect 2 lifeforms in here. Naira removed her cap, her silver-white hair falling free around her shoulders. Then we'd better work quickly. She connected her data device to John's terminal. These shipping manifests might tell us who's behind the weapons. They worked side by side, analyzing the data they'd collected. The weapons had been diverted using Admiral Perkins' access codes, but the routing patterns suggested the codes had been used without his knowledge. A sophisticated hack. This level of infiltration suggests inside knowledge of Earth Defense Force protocols, John said grimly. Someone very high up in your government or mine is involved. Or both, Naira added quietly. A heavy silence fell between them as they considered the implications. If high-ranking officials from both their governments were collaborating to smuggle weapons and provoke conflict, the entire negotiation process was a sham. Why? John finally asked. What's in the Taurus sector that's worth starting a war? Naira hesitated, then decided to trust him with classified information. The sector contains deposits of quantum crystalline formations, rare, nearly indestructible, and capable of storing vast amounts of energy. Whoever controls those deposits would have a significant military and economic advantage. Enough advantage to justify arming insurgents and creating a pretext for military occupation, John concluded. Precisely. Their eyes met in shared understanding. They had stumbled onto something far larger than a simple smuggling operation. We need to take this to someone we can trust, John said. But first, we need to identify who's behind it. Before Naira could respond, a thunderous crash shook the room as the door to John's quarters was forcibly breached. 4 armed figures in Black R Syndicate combat gear burst through, weapons raised. John reacted instantly, diving toward Naira and knocking her behind the desk as plasma fire sizzled through the air where they had been standing. He rolled to his feet, drawing his sidearm in one fluid motion and returning fire. Naira recovered quickly, her elite guard training taking over. She upended the heavy desk to create cover, then fired precisely at the closest attacker. Her shot found its mark, dropping the Syndicate enforcer where he stood. John engaged in hand-to-hand with another attacker who had closed the distance. The human's surprising strength was on full display as he blocked a vibroblade strike and countered with a devastating combination that left the enforcer unconscious. Naira took aim at a third attacker, but a plasma bolt grazed her shoulder, burning through her clothing and searing her orange skin. She stifled a cry of pain and adjusted her position, returning fire with deadly accuracy despite her injury. The fourth attacker unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, forcing John and Naira to hunker down behind their rapidly disintegrating cover. A stray bolt hit a power conduit in the wall, causing an explosion that blew a hole in the adjacent wall. "The service corridor!" John shouted over the chaos. "Go!" Naira fired a covering barrage as John grabbed their data devices. Together, they dove through the smoking hole in the wall, finding themselves in a dimly lit service passage, similar to those they'd navigated earlier. "This way," John directed, taking the lead. He winced visibly, and Naira noticed a burn wound on his shoulder where plasma fire had penetrated his clothing. "You're injured," she observed as they ran. "So are you," he replied, glancing at her scorched shoulder. "We can compare wounds later. Right now, we need to disappear." They navigated the maze of service corridors, moving deeper into the station's infrastructure. Behind them, alarms blared as station security responded to the weapons fire. But they couldn't risk contacting security yet, not when they didn't know who to trust. After 20 minutes of evasive maneuvering, they found themselves in an abandoned maintenance hub, far from the populated areas of the station. John secured the access points, while Naira scanned for surveillance devices. Finding none, they finally allowed themselves a moment to assess their situation. "Let me see your wound," Naira said, approaching John. He shrugged out of his torn jacket, revealing an angry burn across his left shoulder. Naira examined it with professional detachment. Outwardly, at least, inwardly, she found herself concerned for this human in a way that went beyond tactical considerations. "Surface burn. Painful but not serious," she concluded. "You were fortunate." "What about you?" John nodded toward her injured shoulder. Naira allowed him to examine the plasma burn on her upper arm. His touch was gentle as he assessed the damage. "Also, superficial," he said. "Cryan skin seems more resistant to plasma burns than human skin." "One of our many evolutionary advantages," Naira replied, attempting to lighten the moment. John smiled faintly. "Yet you still broke your hand on my abs." Despite everything, Naira found herself laughing, a soft, genuine sound that surprised them both. "I suppose we each have our strengths." The levity was short-lived. They were fugitives now, hunted by professional killers, with evidence of a conspiracy that implicated high-ranking officials from both their governments. "We need to identify who's behind this," John said, returning to the data they'd salvaged. "Then we can determine who might be trustworthy enough to approach." Using a portable terminal from his equipment, John began analyzing the shipping data more thoroughly. Meanwhile, Naira used her device to access secure Cryan communication channels, searching for any unusual patterns. "Look at this," John said after several minutes. The weapon shipment was authorized using Admiral Perkins' codes, but the authentication came through a relay station linked to Cryan military intelligence. Naira frowned. That would require General Draus's authorization. She recalled Draus's instructions to find, or create, evidence against the Earth delegation. Had he been setting her up to take the fall for his own conspiracy? "We need more proof," she said decisively, "and I know how to get it." She explained her plan to John. General Draus and whoever he was working with on the Earth side would need to meet to coordinate their next move, especially now that their weapons cache had been discovered. If Naira and John could intercept their communications or, better yet, record a meeting, they would have the evidence they needed. "It's risky," John pointed out. "If we're caught, then we're no worse off than we are now," Naira countered. "But we need help. Someone with technical expertise who isn't affiliated with either of our governments." John considered for a moment. "I know someone, Dr. Lynn Tora, a Torian xenobiologist with the Galactic Science Consortium. She's been helping me track the biological effects of certain weapons the Syndicate has been developing. She has contacts throughout the station and owes me a favor." "Can you contact her securely?" John nodded. "The question is, can we trust her?" "At this point," Naira said grimly, "we don't have much choice." Dr. Lynn Tora proved to be both trustworthy and resourceful. The Torian scientist met them at a discreet location, bringing medical supplies for their injuries and the technical equipment they would need for their plan. "The Grand Nexus Hotel is hosting a private gathering tonight," Dr. Tora informed them, her vertical eyelids blinking rapidly as she worked on John's shoulder wound. Reserved under a corporate pseudonym, but the biometric scans matched General Draus and several Earth military officials. "Including Admiral Perkins?" John asked. "Yes, along with representatives from the Blacker Syndicate." The Torian applied a regenerative patch to John's burn. "There. That should accelerate healing by approximately 72%. Not as efficient as a medical bay, but sufficient for your needs." She turned her attention to Naira's injury, using a different compound suitable for Cryan physiology. While she worked, the Torian's analytical equipment scanned Naira's vital signs. Dr. Tora paused, her color shifting to a surprised purple. "Commander, are you aware of your current biological state?" Naira frowned. "What do you mean?" The Taurian adjusted her scanner, confirming the reading. You are exhibiting secondary life signs consistent with early-stage pregnancy. Silence fell over the room. Naira stared at the Taurian in disbelief, while John seemed frozen in place. That's impossible, Naira finally said. Cryans and humans aren't genetically compatible. Dr. Tora's skin rippled with scientific interest. Apparently, that assumption is incorrect. The secondary biosignature shows hybrid characteristics, approximately 12 days into development. 12 days. Naira's mind raced. That would place conception around the time she'd first met John, which was biologically impossible unless their first physical contact in the gym had somehow facilitated genetic transfer through previously unknown mechanisms. Are you certain? John asked, his voice carefully controlled. The readings are definitive, Dr. Tora confirmed. This is a remarkable scientific discovery. Cross-species reproduction between humans and cryans has been theoretically impossible due to chromosomal differences. Naira felt lightheaded. She was carrying a human-cryan hybrid child, something that should not exist according to all known xenobiology. And not just any human's child, but Captain John Reed's, the man whose abdomen had broken her hand, the man she was now on the run with, the man she had kissed in a maintenance shaft and couldn't stop thinking about. We need to focus on the mission, she said firmly, pushing aside the shocking revelation. We can address this after we've exposed the conspiracy. John's eyes met hers, filled with questions and concerns, but he nodded in agreement. Dr. Tora, can you help us infiltrate that meeting at the Grand Nexus? The Taurian scientist seemed disappointed to leave the biological mystery, but returned to the task at hand. Yes, I've brought surveillance equipment that can be remotely activated. The challenge will be placing it in the meeting room beforehand. Leave that to us, Naira said, her training taking over despite the emotional turmoil within. What we need from you is a secure transmission channel to broadcast whatever we record station-wide. Dr. Tora considered this. I can establish a link to the station's emergency broadcast system, but once activated, station security will trace the signal within minutes. That's all the time we'll need, John assured her. If we can broadcast proof of the conspiracy to the entire station, neither government can sweep it under the rug. As they finalized their plan, Naira avoided John's gaze. The revelation of her pregnancy had complicated an already dangerous situation exponentially. But she couldn't allow herself to be distracted, not when they were about to confront the architects of a potential interstellar war. The mission came first. Everything else, including the impossible child growing within her, would have to wait. The Grand Nexus Hotel occupied the upper levels of the station, catering to the wealthiest visitors to Nexus Prime. Its opulent facade concealed state-of-the-art security systems designed to protect the privacy of its high-profile guests. Naira and John, disguised as maintenance personnel with identities provided by Dr. Tora, managed to access the service areas of the hotel. Their objective was to place surveillance devices in the private conference room, reserved for the meeting between General Dryos, Admiral Perkins, and the Blackar Syndicate representatives. Security patrol in 30 seconds, John whispered, monitoring the hotel's security feeds through a hacked terminal. Wait for my signal. Naira tensed, ready to move. The surveillance device was concealed in her palm, a marvel of Taurian technology no larger than a fingernail. Now, John signaled as the patrol passed. Naira slipped into the conference room, quickly identifying the optimal placement points for the devices. She worked with practiced efficiency, placing 3 separate units in locations that would capture both audio and visual data from multiple angles. Incoming, John's voice warned through her earpiece. Exit through the service corridor. She finished placing the final device and retreated to the service area where John waited. Together, they made their way to the observation post Dr. Tora had established in an unused storage room 1 level below. The Taurian had transformed the space into an improvised command center, with screens displaying the feeds from their surveillance devices and the status of the station's communication systems. "The meeting is scheduled to begin in 15 minutes, Dr. Tora informed them. "I've established the link to the emergency broadcast system. Once activated, it will transmit to every screen and audio system on Nexus Prime." John checked his weapon, a precaution in case their position was discovered. "Remember, we need clear evidence of the conspiracy before we broadcast. Accusations alone won't be enough." Naira nodded in agreement. Her attention focused on the screens as figures began entering the conference room above them. She recognized General Draus immediately, his imposing figure, unmistakable even in civilian attire. Admiral Perkins arrived moments later, flanked by two aides who positioned themselves at the door. "Recording all channels," Dr. Tora confirmed as the meeting began. Through the surveillance feeds, they watched as General Draus activated a holographic display showing the Taurus sector. "The Earth delegation continues to press their claim," Draus began, his voice clear through their audio feed. "But I've prepared data demonstrating Cryan historical presence in the sector, dating back 3 centuries. "Falsified data," Naira whispered, recognizing the fabricated historical markers Draus was presenting. Admiral Perkins studied the display with a frown. "The Earth Council won't accept these claims without verification." "They'll accept them," Draus replied confidently. When faced with the alternative, he adjusted the display to show military simulations, Cryan forces responding to an apparent Earth aggression in the sector. "We've arranged for an incident involving Earth Defense Force weaponry," Draus explained. "Civilian casualties, regrettable but necessary, will be attributed to Earth forces acting without authorization." Perkins shifted uncomfortably. "I agreed to support your claim to the crystalline deposits in exchange for technology sharing. I never agreed to civilian casualties." "Your commitment is already documented, Admiral," Draus reminded him coldly. "The weapons have your authorization codes. If you attempt to back out now, you'll be implicated as the primary architect of the attack." John and Naira exchanged glances. This was exactly the evidence they needed. Draus admitting to fabricating an attack to trigger military conflict, and blackmailing Perkins into compliance. "Broadcast ready," Dr. Tora indicated. "Wait," John cautioned. "Let's get confirmation of the Blackar Syndicate connection first." On screen, the conference room door opened to admit 2 figures in expensive business attire, the public face of the notorious criminal organization. "Our operatives are in position," one of the syndicate representatives reported. "The weapons have been distributed to our cells throughout the sector. On your command, we can initiate the attacks within 6 hours." "Excellent," Draus nodded in satisfaction. "Admiral Perkins has provided the necessary security codes to ensure Earth Defense Force ships won't interfere until it's too late." Perkins looked increasingly uncomfortable. "The Council will investigate. This won't hold up to scrutiny. By the time any investigation occurs, Cryan forces will have established control of the sector." Draus dismissed his concern. "Earth will accept a favorable trade agreement rather than risk open war." Naira had heard enough. "Broadcast now," she instructed Dr. Tora. The Taurian activated the transmission sequence. On a secondary monitor, they could see their surveillance feed beginning to appear on public screens throughout the station, including the large display in the conference room itself. General Draus froze mid-sentence as his own face appeared on the room's monitor, broadcast with a 10-second delay. For a moment, confusion reigned in the conference room as the conspirators realized they were being recorded and broadcast live to the entire station. "Shut it down!" Draus commanded. But it was too late. Station-wide, everyone from diplomats to dock workers was witnessing his admission of planning false flag attacks. "We need to move," John said urgently. "They'll trace the broadcast within minutes." As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the hotel. Dr. Tora's equipment showed security forces converging on their location. "I'll maintain the broadcast as long as possible," the Taurian promised. "You two should escape while you can." "We're not leaving you," Naira insisted. "My diplomatic status with the Science Consortium provides certain protections," Dr. Tora assured them. "You, however, will be killed before you can testify. Go." Reluctantly, John and Naira headed for the exit, but they were too late. The door burst open, revealing 4 Blackar enforcers with weapons raised. "Kill them all!" came the order from their comms, Dryos's voice, panicked and enraged. John reacted instantly, charging the first enforcer before he could fire. His shoulder slammed into the man's chest, driving him back into his companions and creating momentary chaos. Naira seized the opportunity, firing with precision that dropped one of the disoriented enforcers. The remaining attackers recovered quickly, returning fire with plasma weapons that scorched the walls around them. John rolled behind a console, emerging with a thrown metal shard that embedded itself in an enforcer's throat. Dr. Tora had taken cover behind her equipment, which was beginning to smoke from plasma damage. "The broadcast is still transmitting," she called out. 3 more minutes until complete." Naira engaged the third enforcer in close combat, her elite guard training evident in every precise movement. She blocked a vibroblade strike, twisted the weapon free, and used it against her opponent in one fluid sequence. The final enforcer aimed directly at the broadcast equipment. John dove across the room, intercepting the plasma bolt with his body. His reinforced clothing absorbed much of the impact, but he still cried out as energy burned through to his skin. Naira spun at the sound, momentarily distracted. The enforcer she'd been fighting used the opportunity to slam her against the wall. She stumbled, losing her grip on her weapon as she fell. The enforcer raised his blade for a killing strike, only to jerk backward as Dr. Tora shot him with a stun weapon concealed in her scientific equipment. 90 seconds remaining on broadcast, the Taurian announced. John struggled to his feet, favoring his injured side. The final enforcer was advancing on Dr. Tora, whose stun weapon was recharging. Naira had recovered her balance, but not her weapon. In desperation, she grabbed a length of broken conduit and hurled it like a spear. Her aim was true. The improvised weapon struck the enforcer's weapon hand, causing his shot to go wild. The plasma bolt hit a power junction, triggering an explosion that filled the room with smoke and sparks. Through the chaos, John tackled the disoriented enforcer. They grappled briefly before John delivered a decisive strike that left his opponent unconscious. "Broadcast complete," Dr. Tora announced triumphantly as the smoke began to clear. "The entire station has witnessed Drouse's confession." As if in confirmation, they heard commotion from above, the sound of station security forces entering the conference room. The conspiracy had been exposed, and the conspirators were being apprehended. Naira moved to John's side, helping him stand. "Your injury?" "Worth it," he grimaced. "The evidence is out. No one can bury this now." Dr. Tora approached them, her skin cycling through colors that indicated excitement. "Station security is broadcasting that General Dryos and the syndicate representatives have been detained. Admiral Perkins has surrendered himself, claiming coercion." Naira allowed herself to feel a moment of relief. They had succeeded against overwhelming odds. The conspiracy to trigger an interstellar conflict had been exposed and stopped. But as John leaned against her, his breath warm against her neck, she knew their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The revelation of her impossible pregnancy remained unaddressed. And once the immediate crisis passed, both their governments would have questions about their actions and their relationship. For now, though, they had prevented a war. Everything else could wait. The aftermath unfolded rapidly. Station security, once presented with irrefutable evidence of the conspiracy, moved decisively to secure the conspirators and the weapons cache. Both the Cryan and Earth governments issued immediate statements, distancing themselves from the actions of Dryos and Perkins, promising full investigations and accountability. Naira and John were debriefed separately by their respective delegations, then together by station security. Their actions, while unorthodox, were ultimately recognized as having prevented a potential catastrophic conflict. Formal commendations for interplanetary peace service were hastily arranged, a political move to demonstrate both governments' commitment to cooperation after the near disaster. General Dryas was stripped of his rank and taken into Cryan custody. Admiral Perkins, claiming he had been blackmailed into cooperation, was suspended pending investigation. The Blackar Syndicate representatives disappeared into the station's justice system, facing charges that would likely keep them imprisoned for decades. Through it all, Naira and John had little opportunity to speak privately. The revelation of Naira's pregnancy remained unaddressed between them, a monumental personal issue overshadowed by interplanetary politics. 3 days after the broadcast, they finally found themselves alone in a medical bay where both were receiving final treatment for their injuries. Dr. Tora had arranged the privacy, understanding their need to discuss matters away from official scrutiny. "How's your shoulder?" Naira asked as John finished having a regenerative patch removed. "Fully healed," he replied, rotating the joint to demonstrate. "Earth medicine isn't quite as advanced as Cryan technology, but it gets the job done." He nodded toward her arm. "And your injury?" "No trace remains." She hesitated, then added, "Dr. Tora has confirmed the other condition as well." John's expression grew serious. "The pregnancy?" "Yes. She's been running tests. It appears that human and Cryan DNA can combine under specific circumstances. Something about the unique quantum resonance of our cellular structures when in close proximity." Naira looked down at her still flat abdomen. "It's unprecedented. A 1 in billions chance." "What do you want to do?" John asked quietly. Naira met his gaze. "I'm keeping it. This child represents something important. Proof that our species aren't as different as we've always believed. But I understand if you don't wish to be involved." John moved closer, taking her hands in his. "Naira, I've been thinking about nothing else since we found out. This child is a miracle, scientifically and personally. Of course I want to be involved." Relief washed through her. "It won't be easy. Both our cultures will have opinions." "They already have opinions about us working together," John pointed out with a slight smile. "We've already changed the galaxy once this week. Why not again?" Naira found herself returning his smile. "Always so confident, Captain Reed." "John," he reminded her gently, "I think we're well past titles at this point." "John," she agreed, stepping closer into his embrace. Their kiss was different from the desperate one shared in the maintenance shaft. Slower, deliberate, filled with promise rather than danger. When they separated, Naira felt a certainty she hadn't expected. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Dr. Tora chose that moment to enter, her skin flushing a diplomatic purple when she realized what she'd interrupted. "Apologies for the intrusion. I thought you should know. Representatives from both your governments are discussing the establishment of a human Cryan cultural exchange center here on Nexus Prime. Apparently, your collaboration has inspired some progressive thinking." John laughed. "If they only knew how progressive." Naira elbowed him gently. "They'll find out soon enough." 6 months later, the Human Cryan Cultural Exchange Center was officially opened on Nexus Prime. The Grand Hall featured a central sculpture of a young girl with orange-tinged skin and silver-streaked dark hair, an artistic representation of what the first human Cryan child might look like. For now, the actual child remained a secret, growing within Naira, her pregnancy just beginning to show beneath her formal, Cryan ceremonial robes. Standing beside her, John wore his Earth Defense Force dress uniform, newly adorned with the Interspecies Cooperation Medal both had received. Representatives from both civilizations gave speeches about peace, cooperation, and shared future. Scientists speculated about the technological and cultural advances that might emerge from closer relations between humans and cryons. Ordinary citizens from both species mingled, curious and increasingly accepting. As the ceremonial lights dimmed and soft music played, John took Naira's hand. "They're celebrating what they think is a theoretical future," he murmured. "Little do they know it's already on its way." Naira placed her free hand over her growing belly. "She'll have a lot of expectations to live up to." "She'll exceed them all," John said confidently. "With your strength and my abs of steel, how could she not?" Naira laughed, remembering their first encounter, how she'd broken her hand on his stomach, how that moment of humiliation had led to this unimaginable future. "Perhaps she'll have your stomach and my common sense." "A terrifying combination," John agreed with a smile. Under the glittering lights of the new cultural center, surrounded by the hopeful energy of two species beginning to see past their differences, they shared a gentle kiss, proof that love could transcend even the vast gulfs between the stars. And within Naira, the impossible child continued to grow, a living bridge between worlds, the first of her kind, her genetic code holding secrets that would fascinate xenobiologists for generations to come. But that was a story for another day. For now, she was simply a daughter, loved before she was even born, the living embodiment of a future no one had dared to imagine.